PM Express Business Edition. We have heard from government, the ministers, state actors on the 2022 budget. But what about businesses? What are they saying about the budget? Is it going to be that engine of growth? What does the budget hold for them in terms of the prospects? What about the policies? Are they pro-growth that will aid their expansion? Well, the proposed tax measures as well, how would that help the entrepreneurs and startups out there? Well, on PM Express Business Edition, we are looking at the 2022 budget. Is it business friendly? Are those policies going to help grow their businesses or not? I'll be engaging Mark Bedu-Abuaji, Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Joe Jackson is Director of Operations at Delex Financial Services. And also we'll be talking to Alex Frimpong, his Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association, and Abeku Jan Kwanzaa, his partner at accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. So is 2022 budget business friendly, or rather, it's not business friendly? All these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. 2022 budget is still on the table. We've heard from government officials, we've heard from the state institutions and certain government agencies. But what about businesses, entrepreneurs, startups? What do they make of this budget? Is it business friendly? Will it aid their growth or not? Mark Bedu-Abuaji is the Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, representing businesses out there. And also Joe Jackson, he's Director of Operations, Delex Finance in the financial industry. And also Abeku Jan Kwanzaa, he is with PricewaterhouseCoopers, an accounting firm. And also employers, Alex Frimpong, he is Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association. What do these people make of the budget? Will the budget policies outlined in the budget help grow their enterprises, or rather it will stifle them? Are we seeing a more expansionary or austere budget, and what would that impact or mean for them? This is PM Express Business Edition. And gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been interesting day, interesting week. We thought that after the budget is done, we will all go to sleep. But it looks like rather there's more work, because a lot of businesses like yours, I know you're looking through to still see how it would impact your operations. Let me start with Mr. Joe Jackson. You, directly on the ground as a business, are you still going through the document to see how you have to adjust your business and operations?
I'll be honest with you. What we were looking for was not actually in the document. And it was only yesterday that the finance minister provided more clarification on what is now called the Momo Tax.
Okay.
And our biggest concern, of course, we have the scenario planning, but our biggest concern was the Momo Tax. Remember that in my company, Delex Finance.
Yeah. Recently, you've been heavy on electronic platforms.
We are completely digital.
Yeah.
And in an average month, all my disbursements, 80% of my disbursements will go through Momo, because I'm doing small amounts and rapid amounts. And these are in the tens of millions per month. So a 1.7% tax, of course, now is harsh.
Wow.
And changes the numbers. So it was important for us to see it before and analyze it. And so it was only today that we started not breaking it down and saying how it will affect the business. But I must tell you that there are lots of us who have a sinking feeling where this Momo Tax is concerned.
Interesting.
Yes.
I'll come back to you. Let me bring you back to Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I know you guys are still meeting, but first thoughts, worried, or listen, George, we are still going through to see, because every day it appears different things are being said.
Well, so we are still going through the document, and for us, we have to be able to identify certain opportunities and benefits that businesses can tap into, and also look at the risk inherent in the budget. So day in, day out, the research team is constantly analyzing the budget to look out for some of these opportunities. That's the main reason why we organize the budget review, for others to also bring up their opinions and their judgment on the budget. So I think for now, up to the next month, continuously we're going to review it and also be able to inform our members on the areas that they can benefit from.
I know one area that most businesses are worried about, Uncle Joe and Mr. Besson, has to do with taxes. I want to do a quick run through with the tax partner, Abeku Jan Kwanzaa, on the taxes issues and whether we are well placed when we complain too much about the taxes or not. Abeku Jan Kwanzaa is a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So help me out in terms of the taxes and how we should position ourselves, Abeku.
All right. Good evening, George, and good evening to all our viewers. As far as taxes are concerned, what we have here is a mixed bag. And by that, what I mean is that, George, as Joe said, the e-transactions levy is the first thing that comes top of mind.
Elephant in the room.
However, there are other things that government has introduced, which one would call business friendly. And as we go through the conversation, I'll be glad to break down those. But just to give you some heads up, the first thing is that government has expanded the scope for businesses that can apply tax at the rate of 3%. Then I will explain that further later. Also, for those in mining, and in particular small-scale miners, their effective tax that they pay, and I'll explain that subsequently, has also gone down. So, George, there are a number of things, and that's why I choose to describe it as a mixed bag. There are certain parts that may be described as not business-friendly, but there are other aspects that are also business-friendly. So that's my way of preliminary comment, George.
Quickly, let me look at the bit where it can be described as not business-friendly, and how should businesses position themselves in terms of posturing, strategy, and the way forward?
All right, so George, maybe I will start from one of the topical issues, the issue around the discount on benchmark values. And for the purpose of our audience, I would attempt to situate what all those things actually mean. So George, when you bring down things into Ghana, and those items should be valued for the purposes of import tax, what the law requires is that your commercial invoice should be the starting point. But over time, I guess businesses, importers have not given the GRA sufficient comfort to rely on those invoices. Hence, the GRA, or the Customs Division in particular, tends to apply what is generally called secondary valuation procedures for custom duties, hence the issue around benchmark. Now, the question that some people have asked is that, are those benchmark values, are those values in the database really, really fair? Or are they actually overstated, such that whenever the GRA does not rely on your commercial invoice, you tend to pay a little bit more? So how businesses should position themselves, especially for those that would no longer, on implementation of this budget, enjoy the discount value, is to actually make a case to the GRA or the Customs Division in particular that my invoice is actually a true reflection of the item that I am bringing in. So except for used vehicles, where the law steps aside from your commercial invoice, generally for products that are imported into Ghana, businesses should be able to justify to the GRA that my invoice value is correct. Hence, there is no need to apply a benchmark value, especially now that those businesses would have lost the discount that would be granted on that benchmark value. So as regards positioning, businesses should be able to demonstrate to the GRA that their invoices is actually the right reflection of the items that are being brought into Ghana. Thanks, George.
I'll come back to you again on more of the strategy going forward, because Whether we like it or not, it looks like these taxes will be there. Let me come in studio and come to Mr. Joe Jackson. So for you, I mean, how worried are you as a business person when you go through this budget, or how optimistic are you as a business when you go through this budget?
Well, in truth, you have to look at it two ways. I look at the budget and I see that the actions are tough. So I could actually go back and ask myself, what were the constraints that they are acting on? And why is the budget so tough? And when you look at it, right, you go back to a theme that I've been talking about for quite some time, which is that the public coffers of this country are empty.
Interesting.
That the country, when I say Ghana is broke, I don't mean, I mean our coffers managed by, we are broke.
But that's a very interesting statement to make, Mr. Jackson. What is the basis of, why is the basis of the
Well, you can show one of the slides, right?
Yeah.
Which is titled Ghana is broke.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, you
and our producers will try and get that stuff for us.
It's just look at it this way. Up to September this year, the total revenue and grants was 37.45 million. Total expenditure from January to September was 70.32 million. That means the deficit was 32.87 million. Now, when you look at that, it means that literally 88% of what we spent, we didn't have money for. 88% of what we spent, we didn't have any money for. So what would you call somebody who's paid 1,000 cedis and spends 1,880 cedis? You would say, listen, this person is totally broke. And that's where we are. And so when you look at that, then it tells you that we need drastic action. And in fact, when you project it to the next, and you look at what happened for 2022, you see that the whole effect was just trying to bring down those numbers. And so the projected income was going to go up from 100, from something just around 50 billion, all the way to 100 billion. You need to do that because you need to bring some sanity into your numbers. We are between a rock and a hard place. So obviously, some of those taxes were imposed so that they could balance the books. Once you know that, then we can start to have the discussion as to, was this the easiest way to balance the books? Was this the most effective way to balance the books? And are the books being balanced at the cost of lowering the expectations of businesses? Now, bear in mind, all we are saying is that from the 50 billion you collected this year to the 100 billion you want to collect next year, that money is going to come from businesses and individuals. So you're going to take 50 billion out of those pockets. Now, it's very simple. It means margins will drop. It means there'll be less of an incentive to employ people. So as much as we should recognize the dire strait we are in, the dire state of our public coffers, we must also realize that this budget, if necessary, is going to come at some cost to business. Is that cost fair or not? That's more for the politicians to answer. But I tell you, the biggest challenge you have is for a country that can't create jobs. For a country that says the SMEs are the engine of growth. To balance our books, we have to restrain those SMEs. We have to constrain them, right? And it's easy to talk about small-scale miners. They're getting some relief. It's easy to talk about other bits and pieces, but it's a balancing act. And I think on the whole, you have to pull 50 billion from the citizens of the country.
Mr. Jackson, you made one very, very important statement. Now comes to Mr. This, and I also bring in the employer situation about businesses lowering their expectations, margins are going to drop. It means that I should, if I'm looking for a job from Dalex, I should lower my expectations as well.
That's just the truth. I'm facing a tax that will hit my business, right? Mm. If you were an Instagram entrepreneur, as I call all those new businesses that are advertising and selling on Instagram, your primary mode of receiving money is Momo. If you're a delivery person selling all those, moving around, trading, all those businesses depend on Momo. And that's why the use of Momo has gone up dramatically.
So just let me quickly bring in the Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association, Mr. Alex Frimpong. And I'm very interested about employment as well. Mr. Alex Frimpong, thank you so much for joining us on PM Express Business Edition. And just a quick wrap one there about employers. I mean, what do you make of the budget? Excited, worried, or it's more of a wait and see?
For having me. We have put a team together to study the budget in its entirety, looking at areas such as the policies that will ensure macroeconomic stability, the key issue having to do with the new tax arrangements that are going to come up, then also the issue of entrepreneurship going forward. And most importantly, the issue of skill development. So a team is studying it, and we will come out with our perspective on the budget 2022 in the coming days.
Mr. Frimpong, I wanted to also get from you, I mean, there are issues about taxes, there are issues about some of your members just coming out of COVID and all the rest. Do I get from you that you could be in a good position to employ, or employment is something that, again, will be on the ice as we speak?
Well, I think the biggest challenge we have is how we can ensure that we are able to bring down the spread of the pandemic. If that issue is reduced to the barest minimum, I can assure you that we will see some progress in the economic recovery, and businesses are likely to continue to employ.
But what are your members telling you? I mean, looking into the crystal ball, and so far, what has been outlined in the budget, not fine details, but the top line item, there are new taxes coming in. Obviously, that is going to impact on your bottom line.
Well, for businesses, when it comes to the issue of taxes, instantly, the reaction is that it is going to affect us in one way or the other. But I'm sure if you look at it in its entirety, you should be able to assess whether or not, if these taxes are implemented, potentially government can use that to achieve the purpose for which these taxes are intended. I think many a time, one of the key challenges that we have is that when these budgets are read, quickly we react to the various proposals here and there. But along the way, when implementation is being rolled out, I'm wondering how many of us will have the time and the resources to really find out whether these proposals see the light of day and potentially the intended purpose have been achieved. I think that is one of the biggest problems that we have. So I think we should be able to do an in-depth review of these proposals. Potentially, are they intended to ensure that we achieve the economic indicators that will really change the business environment for us to make progress? If yes, then what can we do to mitigate any potential challenges that we have? So, as I said, a group is studying the budget in its entirety. And in the coming days, we should be able to bring our comments to the Finance Ministry and also to the wider public.
So more of cautiously optimistic, if I should say?
Well, I think in its entirety, it's hopeful and optimistic. But you can only be sure about that during implementation. Because the budget in itself it has very good intentions. But as to whether we'll be able to achieve that will be determined by how the rollout is consciously done and the results that are likely to be achieved.
But Mr. Frimpong, before I let you go, as we speak right now, what is the state of your members and your other businesses? Are they gradually picking up, or listen, they are still kind of struggling?
Well, I think the signs are on the wall that recovery is in sight, and the optimism is quite high, but cautious. And two things: are we able to overcome the challenges of the pandemic? If yes, then 2022 business are likely to move in full gear. If not, we are likely to still be in the wait and see mode. And most importantly, how government can stabilize the macroeconomic environment. I think that's key. That's fundamental. Because if we're able to handle inflation, if we're able to handle cost of capital, we're able to handle the cost of forex. And I think now energy is becoming more reliable, but the price is still not affordable compared to other competitive West African countries and even on the continent. So in the coming days, COVID permitting, we'll see how businesses can really bounce back.
Mr. Frimpong, I thank you so much. Mr. Alex Frimpong is Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association. Thank you so much. Let me come back, Mr. Makabudu and Joe Jackson. I mean, he's speaking from an individual perspective and his business as well and analysis. But from the bigger angle, is the picture still bleak? Or okay, let's hope and see how things will be done well.
Well, the Chamber basically association of businesses, so the sentiment being expressed by Joe Jackson
it's one of a unit.
Yes, cumulatively okay. Is the sentiment by the Chamber. He's a member of the Chamber,
okay.
let me say. So the budget has positives and negatives. And I mean, it's not all that bleak, it's not all that discouraging. But I think that, as you rightly said, in our bid to aggressively increase our revenue based on the debt that we have, I think that the revenue projection for us is too aggressive, and of course, definitely we're going to have effect on businesses who are going to pay the taxes. Now, tax to GDP ratio now, tax revenue is about 12%. They want to move it from 12% to 15%. Yeah. That 3% is huge. The question you need to ask yourself is, who are those going to pay the taxes? Yeah. And then, I mean, income tax is there, but large component of the tax revenue comes from businesses. Yeah. That is why, if you look at the budget, the tax aspect of it largely is going to be borne by businesses. So you made mention of the e-levy. Of course, it's a very brilliant idea, but we were expecting that at least there should be a wider consultation for businesses to also make their input into how this is going to affect their businesses going forward, and how they can even revise it or put it at a level that will be convenient for all of us to pay. If you look at the Momo, it has grown not because of the individual, but because of the transactions that businesses are doing. Huge transactions that
from firms like
Dilex. So if you take 1.75 just by an individual who is paying a little bit over 100 Ghana cedis as their threshold, the money may look small. But for a business that is constantly sending money through Momo, and the monies are huge, cumulatively, it's a big cost. So you need to ask yourself, is this money part of their profit? Is it their cost? Is it their capital? And in all this, if you look at it, it's going to affect business. If it's part of their profit, it means that their profit level is going to reduce. It's part of their capital, it means that their capital is going to reduce. And it's going to generally affect business operations. So, I mean, we are all aware of what government is going through. I mean, as he said, as at September, our debt level is about 340-something billion, which is huge. And it's also important that we also look at the debt level in terms of the external debt and the domestic debt. And that will have also effect on businesses. Now, it means that the domestic debt, which is about 178 billion cedis, is money that government is collecting from the local environment, the banks and the rest. These are monies that are supposed, all things being equal, to go to support businesses. So government in that space is crowding out the private sector. Now, constantly borrowing from the banks means that the government also has to put in something that will make the government bond attractive. So the treasury bill rate is also going up. And you know government bonds are risk-free. And every bank will want to go into it, and then, I mean, they can sit down, offer bonds to government, and then get the revenue. But when we continuously do that, it means that we are starving the businesses of the needed capital to expand. In the end, they may not be able to expand. And the issue of creating jobs will also come in.
You think that could be the biggest challenge next year?
It is one of the biggest challenges, because if you look at the expenditure, a chunk of it is going to pay or service government interest and principal of loans that government has borrowed. A chunk of it, about 78.0%, and that is going to affect a business. And government is going to borrow. In fact, the budget deficit of 7.4% as a percent of GDP in 2022 is going to be financed mainly through the domestic market, and government is going to crowd out the private sector. So it's a very critical situation that you all need to sit down and look at how collectively we can help this. But I think that there should have been a gradual approach to increasing revenue, and not done to just impose it. Just radical
fiscal consolidation is to
just radical way of generating revenue. We are not against government generating revenue, because we know the work that government have to do. But you also have to look at the businesses that are paying the taxes.
Mr. Jackson, in one breath, I get from you about our dark situation. In another breath, I get from you that government is strangling the very good businesses like yours to still be paying taxes.
You see, why it is important to recognize the dire situation is because you need to look at the dilemma that the people who put the budget together are in, and to say, what is the alternative? And I assure you, the alternative, which could be a default on our debt, is all horrendous. So, in truth, let's be clear. The situation is bad. The effect on my business will be tough. But at the moment, my instinct is to grit my teeth and bear it and look for ways in which I can manage the situation. Because you know what? We just don't pay enough taxes.
But isn't the argument about the same good businesses like Dalex, Ghana, National, these are the same 2.4 million persons, or if I should use quotes, these firms that are paying the taxes?
Exactly. Because remember that the issue with us always has been that there are not enough people paying tax. Unfortunately, the challenge we have is that whilst we accept that we are not paying tax, and listen, when you benchmark us against any African country, we're doing very, very poorly.
I know you've done some graphics on this, which is very, very interesting. So yes. Go ahead, yeah.
And if you look at the tax to GDP ratio for across Africa, and there's a slide you can look at, a tax to GDP ratio 2018, you see that Ghana, yes, this is the first thing I want to talk about. Look at
there's some different color codes, and I want you to help me out here.
The blue is how much tax we collect as a percentage of GDP.
Okay.
The brown is the African average. We're not talking the European average. We're not talking the US average. We're talking the African average. So you see that we're doing very badly. In fact, if you look at the next slide, that is even more interesting, because what you see is, that's it. Ghana is the color in green. Look at where Togo is. Togo is doing much better than we are doing. Togo, Burkina Faso, Senegal. So you ask yourself, something must give. We are doing badly. Listen, and the rate has even dropped in 2021. So as we look at it, we've now dropped to about 12%, 12.1%. And then it gets dire because now we're dealing with the only countries that are doing worse than that are Nigeria, Guinea-Bissau, Chad, Congo. That can't be right.
The bit about the tax collection. Let me, if Abeku is there, I want to get back to Abeku Jankwansa, PricewaterhouseCoopers. I mean, why are we not getting around this tax challenge issue?
All right. So, George, when it comes to the issue of taxes, we must begin by classifying the tax types. And broadly, you would be told that for a tax that you pick, you could be dealing with a direct or an indirect tax. Now, for you to comply and get a lot of people complying with direct taxes, it takes quite some effort. And the reason why we've not been able to go around it is that we tend to claim that we have a huge informal sector. But I find this a bit surprising because if you can identify those people, quantify them, ascribe numbers to them, why can't we tax them? But some of the things that government has done or proposed to do in the 2022 budget is to now redefine how those that tend to find themselves in quote unquote small informal sectors should be taxed. So what is the government saying here? Government is saying that if you don't make sales in excess of 500,000 cedis over a year, then you can actually, or it is expected that all things being equal, your tax rate should be a flat rate of 3%. In other words, you don't need to go through the difficult mechanisms of determining whether you have made a taxable profit or not. So George sells, George doesn't sell more than 500,000 a year. Whatever revenue that you get, apply 3% to it and then come and pay. The other thing that government has done, if you remember at the beginning of this conversation, is that as regards small-scale miners, government's claim is that, look, the amount of gold that we export through official sources has dropped. To encourage people to go through the official sources, I want to reduce the withholding tax that applies when people buy the gold from them for exports. So hopefully some of these measures would make it attractive for, unquote, our informal sector to begin migrating for government to be able to tax them properly. And hopefully we should be going around our issues. George, I want to add that this year, government is expecting to collect about 55 billion from tax revenues. And this would increase to about 80 billion for 2022, provided that the measures that have been introduced are properly implemented. So say for the e-levy, well, we all know that the projected revenue, if it's not amended, is going to be about 7 billion. One would ask, how are we going to make up for the extra 25? For the extra 25 million, because we're moving from 55 to 80, which gives a difference of 25, you take out 7 billion, you are left with 18 billion. Government is saying that I'm going to enforce collections, and part of it would be going to employers and ensuring that PAYE would be properly accounted for. So going into 2020, one of the areas that businesses need to take particular notice of is government intention to improve on enforcement. So out of the 25, we expect that 7 will come from the e-transactions levy. The 18 would principally be informed by compliance. George.
Abeko, I'll still come back to you. Let me come to my guest in studio. And Mr. Jackson, I mean, I don't use the word baffled, but I'm worried and all that. But I'm just saying that doesn't mean that we're going to throw our hands up in the air, or there's still some things we can get around, because we understand that there was a cabinet meeting on this e-levy thing, on some of the tax measures, where the Minister of Finance should have had a press conference this evening. Possibly, maybe some things will be reviewed in the budget. Are you optimistic in that area, or listen, we just have to...
Listen, at this moment, I'm not. I'm not optimistic that the e-levy and it is... Because listen, we just have to accept that we are in a difficult space.
Why is government not communicating this?
Well, there's always politics. And our role when you're dealing with your business...
management of the economy. A party thinks this person is better than the other. And that is why they are not communicating some of these
when you are managing your business, you can't play politics with it. You've got to face your reality. And there's one thing, even though you know in your heart that, listen, we will overcome and we will move forward and our business will do well, one of the things, we should not confuse this with brutally facing the reality and saying, this is what's going to happen. So let's start planning for it. And the reality is what we're stating. The coffers are empty. We don't collect enough tax. And we need to fix this quickly enough. What did our friend from, our colleague from PricewaterhouseCoopers say? He says, bringing other people into the tax net can be a messy and drawn out matter. And you are in a place where you've got to fix your issues pretty quickly. That's where we are.
Mark, I mean, your members, I mean, how are you shaping up? Because you have to close the year on a good note. Shareholders are looking for their dividend.
Sure.
Banks are need to be paid. But it looks like just when we thought COVID was going, we have to face a government that is coming in with a quote an austere budget or a fast tracking a fiscal consolidation that has serious implications for businesses as well.
Yeah, well, I think part of the problem we are going through is because of the COVID. I mean, if you look at the expenditure pattern...
We've been levying everything on COVID. I mean,
yes, but if you look at the expenditure pattern, for instance, you see COVID-related expenditure that we have. And also, COVID also affected the revenue generation in the 2020 and 2020 because we just didn't do well, so most of it didn't also pay tax. So in the larger picture, COVID has also played a role. But the good thing is that I think government is also trying to reshape the economy and bring it back on track with the Obatampa care project just to stabilize and revitalize. Now, largely, the level of stabilization has been done. Now we are looking at the revitalization and transformation. That requires that government will need revenue to do some of these things. It's understandable. But the challenge is that the approach in which they are getting it and the effect on business is what we are also more concerned about. That we want to pay, that is fair. We know that you need revenue to undertake a number of projects, that is fair. But the revenue generation approach should at least be gradual on us. Because businesses will have to, among paying taxes, pay for other things, pay for salaries, do expansions, electricity bills, and mind you, all the difficulties that we are going through as businesses, the cost of doing business hasn't changed. They are all there. Electricity is still high, interest rate is still high, the exchange rate depreciation is still, a problem. All those things are there.
I'll be coming
so
to your...
when you come back with an additional problem, then you are trying to overburden the business. If you are not careful and we don't look at things, in a way that will empower the businesses to also grow, we will end up killing the smaller ones. And the bigger ones that we think are sustainable will also gradually reduce in size and they will die. So let us look at it holistically. We need revenue, we are ready to pay. But let's have a gradual approach of generating revenue in order not to kill businesses.
It is PM Express Business Edition. I'm engaging Joe Jackson, he's Director Operations at Dalex, and also Mark Dobwaji, he's the Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We're looking at the 2022 budget, whether they would describe it as business-friendly or not. We also been engaging the Chief Executive of the Employers Association, as well as Beku Kwanzaa. He's a tax partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. We go for a short commercial break and we'll be right back as we talk about Budget 2022. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition, and I'm looking at the way forward now in terms of these businesses out there and what they can do, survive, stay on top. I mean, to do business. Now, let me quickly get to Wekuja and Konsa in a minute, wrap up, and let me come back to my guest and say, so for you, what is the way forward for businesses out there? Because as for the taxes and GRA being aggressive, and when they see a certain George Washington on TV granting interview, the next thing they're at that person's office and all the rest. What should be the way out for businesses out there going into next year? Because we're going to see a very aggressive GRA on the very few faithful ones like Mr. Joe Jackson. What should be the way out? Final thoughts.
All right. So, George, my final thoughts would be that businesses should actually engage the ministry to do a couple of things that should have been done in the past. So what do I mean here, George? You might have heard that recently a tax court was set up. Now, the purpose of that tax court is for the GRA to be able to drag tax offenders to court to get them prosecuted. In the same vein, last year we had a new law which sort of said that if I disagreed with the GRA, I can take the GRA to a board, not necessarily the High Court, which is what the current implementation of the law is. So the first thing would be that we need to engage with the ministry to find out why is it that 1 year after the passage of the law for that board, whilst the GRA now has a tax court to prosecute us for our offenses, why don't they also give us a body that we can easily go to when we are not happy with assessments from the GRA? The second thing, George, is that some of the pushback that is coming as a result of the e-levy is that about 3 years ago, George, we had a law passed to introduce a point of sale device so that when George buys something and that thing requires VAT to be charged, the one that has that POS machine, as soon as it is used, by the end of the day, the GRA at least has an idea of what the person has engaged in. And that should largely reduce what some may decide to call VAT fraud. But here we are, several years down the line, this has still not been implemented. So the last thing I'll basically say to businesses is that because of what government calls the revenue assurance and compliance enforcement, otherwise RACE, government has made it clear that next year will be a year of enforcement to raise an additional 25 billion in taxes. So businesses should try as much as possible to comply so that when the GRA comes around, you are already clean before the audits are carried out. So those are some of the points that I would share with businesses, George.
Wekuja Konsa is a tax partner at accounting and auditing firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers Ghana. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Joe Jackson, I mean, I'm looking at the way forward because it looks like whether we like it or not, these levies will still be there. How are you strategizing to still stay on top going into next year for someone that your firm is so heavy on these electronic platforms?
Well, with respect to the e-levy, we're just saying we saw the details today. Obviously, when you look at the details, there are a few of our worries that have been put to bed. One was a worry that if I pull money from my bank into my wallet, how is it going to be taxed? That has been put to bed. But
the regulations are in now. You've seen them. Oh, okay.
I've seen a document
that
seeks to explain this further.
That's okay.
So when you pull money, you're not going to be taxed. But when you spend, you are going to be taxed.
Okay.
Right? Listen, it's going to be a fact of life. We've got to look for opportunity everywhere there's a challenge. And you've got to ask yourself, so if I don't pay these taxes, what's the alternative? The alternative is die. So you grit your teeth. You hold on tight. And you pay.
How are your members rallying themselves around? Because One of your members is just sitting by you. He
Yes,
thinks that things are going to be quite tough for them going into next year.
It's so obvious, and that is why we are also asking for, if possible, certain amendment to that particular e-levy.
You think it's possible?
We are still engaging.
Okay.
We are of the opinion that at least there should be a cap. In fact, if somebody is sending over 1 million, and you can imagine the 1.75 of that. So if at a certain level we say that from this point, you won't pay the tax, that is fine. And also the threshold. In fact, if you look at 100 cedis, businesses that do day-to-day, most of them send more than 100 cedis, they are going to be charged. So we need to also look at the threshold as well. But also, collectively, I think the budget also has some positives that we also have to address. For instance, is the tax relief for the textiles industry. For me, it's a very important thing that we are doing, because one of the areas where we have comparative advantage is the textiles industry. Okay. And going to AFTA will require that we need to be competitive to be able to export some of this product to other markets. So for me, it's very important. And also, prior to the budget, one of the concerns we raised was the VAT flat rate of 3%, which our members have complained a lot because it became a cost to them. Now, when it has been revised, I think that is go a long way to also help them increase their profitability. The issue of the benchmark, our opinion is not to take entrenched positions. Now, the manufacturing sector is very important because it has a very long value chain that if you put our effort to it, to be able to employ a lot of people. Those in the export-import sector are also very important to us. We should be able to identify areas where we have comparative advantage in here, that if you impose this benchmark is going to affect us. And also strike a balance between importers and exporters, because there are some products that we don't have the capacity now and require that we import them. And it will interest you to note that most of the manufacturing companies that we have now, they all started as importers, and they learn along the line. So let us not take entrenched positions and fight each other. What is important to us that as a country, we have identified industrialization as a key agenda for all of us. How do we go along that line that we achieve that goal, and also sideline issues like the importer? Man, we have opened our borders through AFTA, and now you are asking that we impose certain taxes that will prevent other people from coming in. So let's look at the picture in a bigger way and look at how we can review this benchmark in a way to benefit importers and also be able to achieve our collective agenda of industrializing our country.
Mr. Johnson, your final thoughts? Sorry. No.
Well, tighten your belt.
We've had this since several years. You are still up to tight.
Yeah. Remember that what we are facing today is years upon years of mismanagement, right? Where we now, COVID has exposed that. So the situation didn't happen in one day. Even with what we are trying to do now, it won't be cured in one day. So
Obviously.
tighten your belt.
We'll try. 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I think that we should look at, innovative way of bringing people who are outside the tax net into the tax net. Now they can easily identify businesses and individuals. The tax seems to be always heaped on this individual. There are so many people out there who are not paying taxes. And I think we should also be patriotic enough to be able to contribute to the national kitty and ensure that the challenges that we are going through as a nation in terms of revenue generation is resolved. In the end, it will come and bite all of us. Let us all help government pay your bit and contribute, put pressure on them to provide the services that we are asking from them.
I know the debate, the questions will still go on in your offices, rooms, and even dining halls about whether indeed this budget is giving you that hope going into 2022. The PM Express Business Edition. Your host, George Afe, and have a great day.